"Do you have any money?" asks Frank, looking at my raggedy clothes as I play a tune on the streets of St. Augustine with my dulcimer, hoping for donations into a hat on the street in front of me. Frank is my great high school friend who has come down from Virginia to escape the bitter winter of 1977 and is visiting me in my winter escape. A friend and I have sailed our ancient wooden sailboat down here to Florida to escape the winter, although it has taken over a year to get here. Now we are living on it for free, anchored in the harbor, and I'm pulling in a regular salary of $7 an hour, playing mountain dance music on the street. "So, have you got any money?" Frank says again, and I reply, rather proudly, "Yes, I have $100 to my name." "Well," says he, "I'm going to Key West, where it's a lot warmer than it is here, and there's a great music scene to make money, and if you want to come along and share gas money with me, let's go." After a month in this quaint paradise, playing music every day and living the vagabond life, I'm ready for a change. And never having been in South Florida, agree to go. It'll just be a short trip, as Frank needs to return home in 10 days or so. As I throw my belongings into his van and climb in, my voice echoes in the emptiness of a huge Chevy panel truck. It has no windows and no back seats. "Frank," I say, "what kind of gas mileage does this thing get?" He says it gets about 10 on a good day. After a 10-hour trip, we roll down Route 1 into Old Key West with my $100 gone, all spent at filling stations. "Don't worry," says Frank. "There's a lot of musician work here, and we can form a band together. We find a convenient parking lot, crawl into the back of the van, and go to sleep. Waking up bleary-eyed, I'm pulling my luggage out onto the pavement to get dressed when I notice that the police station is at the edge of the parking lot. Frank says, "We probably don't have to worry about a break-in as long as we stay here." We stumble into Dim Sum Cafe on Duval Street and use the bathroom to try to spruce up a little bit as we buy breakfast with my last few dollar bills. Frank is already perusing the newspaper for gigs with his experience of several years working as a musician in Williamsburg. Whenever he went broke, he would go back to school for a semester, courtesy of his parents, and save enough money to pursue his chosen career. We haven't really seen anything of Key West except the crowds on the main drag, but we are carrying our instruments from bar to bar, offering to audition for gigs later that day. We have never played together before, but my folk tunes are very simple for him to accompany on guitar, and he has a repertoire of solo songs sung in a deep baritone that covers all the pop musical hits. He is doggedly working his way up and down the streets as I follow, but we have no luck until one bar owner tells us to show up at 8 to play without asking us to audition at all. Well, now we have the whole day free to set out and explore the town. The first thing I noticed is that every single payphone is occupied by a ragamuffin guy pleading for money, evidently with the folks back home. When we walk back later, the same guys are still all on the same phones, talking away earnestly. I see a class system operating with a complete mixing of laid-back locals working in retail and deliveries, side by side with young tourists in skimpy attire going in and out of tiny shops with gaudy display windows. If the flashy window displays are not downright raunchy, then they will at least depict blatant sexuality. Walking a few blocks over, we relax at a beautiful beach flanked by ancient brick forts and the Navy base in the distance with huge fuel tanks and ships. At one point I discovered I forgot something back at the cafe, so I told Frank to wait while I went and got it. I jogged through the neighborhoods, but I realized that I was getting hard stares from all the residents hanging around. A guy on the sidewalk held up his hand and stopped me. "Hey man," he says, "you look like you stole something, running around like that. Everybody walks here." So I started walking instead. Back at the beach, Frank was practicing some songs and blending right into the beach scene. We worked up a few of my numbers for the bar job later. In the afternoon, a general exodus from the beach meandered toward Mallory Square for the sunset ritual. Our beach friends advised us to get 5-gallon buckets to sit on if we wanted to perform, and to place the open guitar case just a few feet in front of us, because that's the way it's done. The dock is a huge open space jutting into the harbor, filled with people milling about. Jugglers, acrobats, vendors, drummers, musicians of all sorts are dispersed all across the waterfront through the happy throng. We pick a spot midway between two acts and sit down. Immediately, a few people in the crowd gather around. Like the professional that he is, Frank announces that if they've never seen my instrument before, it's called a dulcimer, and we're going to play some mountain dance music. And he says, "Hit it, John." So I say, "Key of D," and play a fast, rollicking square dance tune. I have to look down at the dulcimer while I'm playing it, but when I finish, I look up, and there's a semicircle of smiling faces surrounding us. As they give us a nice round of applause, they all have a view of the harbor and the approaching sunset behind us. A few sailboats glide along. Frank calls out in his showbiz baritone that if they've never seen a dulcimer before, they should come a little closer and we'll play a waltz. So they're sucked in a little closer to our guitar case as we slow it down and play a melodic, lilting tune. After the clapping at the end, Frank chats quietly with people while he pretends to tune his guitar. The crowd a few feet away showers the guitar case with bills, but then they sort of wander off when we don't start playing again right away. Frank mutters to me to just sit there and look bored, but to get ready to play a loud and fast tune. I tell him I'll sing a sailor song in the key of A. Soon as the old crowd is gone, I bellow out, "I'm sailing across the sea," and hit it hard, gathering a new crowd. After 90 minutes, the sun sets, everybody starts leaving, and we split $120. This town is full of happy people who actually have absolutely nothing to do except talk to each other and enjoy the warm sunshine. As we pack up our instruments, we have lots of conversations with both locals and tourists, all enthusiastic and eager to share stories. Frank is a handsome devil, and several times the same little group of girls come up to him and talk for a while and then walk away again. A fellow points out to me a guy named Mel who is rumored to be digging for sunken pirate treasure. A local guitar player mentions that there's a music jam on the beach tomorrow, and they love to play Irish music. A few guys offer to sell us hidden substances. A nice woman named Marilyn gives us each a homemade brownie from her bike basket, which is her vendor gig. A tall guy calling himself Love 22 with steely eyes and a top hat is selling fake $22 bills. After supper, we report to the bar for our gig. As usual, Frank is the spokesman and I hover in the background next to the big windows opening onto the street. After a while, the owner approaches carrying a short step ladder, and he points to the bar. Fortunately, the bar is about 4 feet wide and up against the wall. Behind that is an enormous American flag, which is where we are supposed to sit while we play. We gamely climb up and face the crowd of old and young, locals and tourists, and a great number of blasé expressions. I wish I had a cowboy hat like Frank's. He swings into action with his announcer's voice and smoothly introduces our first number. I look down at the dulcimer and whang away at a fast tune, and Frank gamely keeps up with his guitar. After a flourish at the end, I look up, and the customers look exactly the same as they did before we started playing. Frank says, thank you very much," and immediately swings into a pop song all by himself. As I sit waiting for my turn, I see some of the same girls that were at the dock come in as a group and sit down, waving to Frank. The evening passes quickly like this, and the bar owner gives us $75 each at the end of the night. Frank goes off with his entourage, and I wander back to the van thinking that this was a pretty good day's work. Next morning, I realized Frank never came back to the van all night, and that was the pattern for the rest of our stay. I never actually saw his courting seduction system that he used or who he was with, but our days repeated in a pleasant blur of breakfasts at the cafe, loitering on the beach, chatting away with our new friends, and playing music wherever we could. After playing a bar each evening, I wouldn't see Frank again until the next morning at the cafe. One day after sunset, Frank said that one of the group of girls needed a ride back to her campground and I could borrow his van by myself to take her home up the Keys about 15 miles. He gives me a long look and introduces me to the beautiful and self-confident Diane. Driving past Stock Island, Boca Chica, Big Coppet, down to Geiger Key, I learn a lot about her independent travels and gypsy years. We turn off Route 1, past the end of a Navy runway that stretches way out into the distance, and then drive miles down a dead-end shore road, park and walk into a mangrove forest. A free beach camping area appears with several dispersed groups of hippies in tents. We're welcome to a campfire and enjoy a mellow, starlit party. As the group breaks up, we go up to her tent on the water, and I ask her how she can live way out here without a car. "Oh, I can always find someone to bring me out, just like you just did." She is so direct and calm in her conversation that I ask her if she sleeps with any of her chauffeurs. "Sometimes," she smiles. We chat about the campground's charming and amazing existence, apparently on a Navy base, and I ask her if Frank's van is safe since it's parked way out at the end of the road. "Well, I really can't say anything about that," she says. "I've never had a car here." I'm feeling a little out of my depth, and I sort of panic and leave the tent and go and sleep in the van. When I show up the next morning in town, Frank asks no questions, and I give no answers. Another day, as I was walking down Front Street, I noticed the guy named Mel walking in front of me. I had learned by this time that he had actually discovered a sunken Spanish galleon, so I followed him. I felt like a detective staying back about a half a block and being inconspicuous. Suddenly he turned into a blank wall, as far as I could tell, and disappeared. When I came up to the spot, I realized that there was a door there with a very small, unmarked Cuban diner inside with room at the counter for about 6 people. I sat down away from Mel, but I ordered the same Cuban sandwich that he did. I'd never had one before, and it was delicious. I was too embarrassed to follow him after he left. Another 7 days passed quickly, and then Frank dropped me off in St. Augustine, and I had $100 in my pocket. I was determined to return to Key West for a longer stay next season.